You know how people always talk about that one moment? The second where your life splits into before and after? Mine was 3:13 a.m. on a Wednesday, and it came with the sharp ring of a phone vibrating on a wobbly nightstand in a too-small studio apartment that still smelled like the neighbors' burnt popcorn. My name is Caroline Blake. Most people call me Carrie. I'm 22 years old. I graduated 6 months ago with a degree in communications I'm not using. I work 2 part-time jobs, and I live in a former laundry room that was converted into an apartment with a curtain instead of a door to the bathroom. Until that phone call, I thought I was just figuring out how to be an adult. I had no idea that I was about to become a mother, overnight. I remember fumbling for the phone with one hand and knocking over a glass of water with the other. The caller ID flashed, Sam. My stomach dropped in that ancient, reflexive way older siblings can trigger even when you haven't seen them in a year. Samantha Blake, my older sister by 4 years and what felt like 5 lifetimes. Sam had always lived like a firecracker on a fuse. Beautiful. Angry. Addicted to chaos. Addicted to other things too. We hadn't spoken since the Thanksgiving she'd shown up drunk and tried to fight our dad with a turkey leg. I blocked her after that. But she still had my number memorized. Of course she did. I hesitated, thumb hovering over decline. Then something made me answer. The first thing I heard was screaming, not Sam's. A baby. Thin, raw, piercing. Then Sam's voice, low and slurred. Carrie. You have to come. I can't. I can't do this. I sat up so fast I felt dizzy. Sam. Where are you? I had a baby, she whispered. She won't stop crying. I think something's wrong. Carrie, I think someone's looking for me. She said the name of a town 5 hours away, one I'd never heard of. Then she dropped the phone. I heard rustling, then a crash, and then silence. That was it. That was the last time I heard her voice. I didn't even think. I grabbed my keys, threw on whatever jeans were on the floor, and drove through the dark with a sick knot in my stomach and a voice in my head saying, "This is crazy. Don't do this. You are not responsible for her anymore." But I didn't listen. When I pulled into the motel parking lot, the first thing I noticed was the light in room 9 flickering like it had given up halfway. The door was slightly ajar. I knocked, called out Sam's name, and when no one answered, I pushed it open. The smell hit me first, formula, sweat, something burnt and sour underneath. Sam was half passed out on the bed, a bottle of vodka on the nightstand, and in the middle of the rumpled sheets was a baby wrapped in a towel, red-faced and screaming like the world had betrayed her from the moment she took her first breath. I picked her up. She was so small, so light it scared me. She stopped crying the second I held her. Like she had been waiting for me. Sam didn't wake up. I stayed up all night feeding the baby formula from a bottle I found on the floor, wrapped her in the cleanest towel I could find, and rocked her while I sat on the edge of a stained mattress and listened to the ice machine clicking outside. At sunrise, I found a note scrawled on the back of a receipt. Her name is Ava. Don't let them take her. You're better than me. No signature. No explanation. Just that, and the birth certificate folded in a torn envelope. No father listed. No one else. Just me. And her. By the time I looked up, Sam was gone. Her bags, her keys, everything. Just gone. I didn't call the police. I didn't call CPS. I should have. I know that. But I couldn't. Not when I looked down and saw Ava's tiny hand curled around my finger like I was the only thing in the world she trusted. I told everyone, my roommate, my friends, even my own parents, that she was mine. A secret pregnancy. A complicated situation. I let them believe what they wanted to believe. I quit one of my jobs, found a cheaper apartment with no windows and mold in the shower. Bought a second-hand crib from Craigslist and learned how to be a mother from YouTube videos at 3 a.m. I was 22, broke, scared, and completely alone. There was this night, maybe 3 weeks in, when I was standing at the kitchen sink, bottle in one hand, Ava crying in the background, and I just started sobbing. The kind of sobbing that comes from somewhere so deep it doesn't even make sound at first. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I didn't know if I was already failing. But I looked down at her, that tiny, furious, impossible baby, and I just said, "I'm not letting you go." I didn't know then that holding on to her would mean losing everything else. But that came later. And it started with a phone call. 7 years may not sound like a lifetime to most people, but for me, it's an entire galaxy of silent days, white lies, forged documents, whispered apologies, and a child's laughter that sometimes feels like it's the only real thing in a world I built entirely out of fiction. My name is still Caroline Blake, though I rarely hear anyone call me that anymore. Most people just say Ava's mom at school pickup, at the pediatrician's office, or at the post office where I work part-time during the holidays to supplement my income. By day, I'm a paralegal at the town's busiest law office, where my hands type faster than my brain can process, and by night, I am everything Ava needs, the storyteller, the boo-boo fixer, the bedtime singer, the anchor she never knew had a story far more fragile than it looked. Ava is 7 now, all limbs and questions and the kind of smile that makes strangers glance at me like I'm doing something right. She loves puzzles, hates broccoli, and once told me that she wants to be a marine biologist or a witch, depending on the day. She believes in magic, but not fairy tales, because, in her words, fairy tales always have missing moms, and I already have mine. She doesn't know that I was never supposed to be hers. She doesn't know about the motel, the screaming, the vodka bottle on the nightstand, or the note that made me a mother overnight. What she does know, what I have made her believe, is that I gave birth to her in a hospital near Des Moines, that her father was someone I loved once but who moved to Europe before he knew I was pregnant, and that we are all the family we need. She has asked about him, of course. Every year the questions become more complicated, more persistent, harder to answer without stumbling over the details I can't fabricate fast enough. It started with innocent inquiries. Was my dad funny? Did he like dinosaurs too? Then, a few weeks ago, she asked something that took my breath away. Mom, if I wasn't born in a hospital, would that be illegal? We were sitting in the bathtub, her surrounded by foam letters and plastic mermaids, and I swear I nearly dropped the shampoo bottle when she said it. I mean, she continued, scrubbing behind her ear like a little scientist conducting an investigation. Ava P., in my class said her baby brother was born at home and someone had to sign papers or it would be a crime. I faked a laugh so strained it probably sounded like choking. Sweetheart, you were born in a hospital. I even have the baby bracelet somewhere. Trust me. The baby bracelet doesn't exist, of course. What I do have is a forged birth certificate, carefully crafted by a friend from college who owed me a favor, listing me as Ava's biological mother and a generic name in the father field that I picked from a baby book because it sounded convincingly average. That fake document has held up for years. It got Ava enrolled in school, it satisfied the pediatrician's forms, and it even convinced my devoutly religious parents that their granddaughter was brought into the world through normal means. They've asked questions, too, none more terrifying than when they asked if Ava had been baptized yet, and when I said no, they went quiet in that dangerous way that means something is about to be insisted upon. 2 days later, my mother brought pamphlets from their church and a baptism gown from when I was a baby, and I panicked so hard I nearly told the truth. Instead, I told another lie. I already had her baptized when she was a baby, with Sam's church, when I stayed with her that summer. My mother's face lit up, and then she asked for the certificate. I spent that entire night doctoring a baptismal document using a template I found on Etsy, of all places. I signed the name of a fake priest, invented a parish, and printed it out on expensive parchment paper I had to drive 40 minutes to buy. The next day, I gave it to my mom in a frame. She wept. I smiled and told myself it was better this way. Sometimes, I still believe that. But not always. Because the cracks are beginning to show, and every day that Ava gets older, every moment she becomes more inquisitive, I can feel the scaffolding I've built starting to creak under the weight of all these years of deceit. It got worse last week. It was a Wednesday, always a Wednesday, when my phone rang just after noon. I was at work, halfway through sorting a stack of affidavits, when the school nurse called. Ava had a fall on the playground. Nothing serious, but we'd like you to come in. My heart stopped. When I arrived, she was sitting on the cot with a bandage on her chin and her hair in the messy braid I'd sent her off with that morning. She smiled when she saw me, her eyes a little watery but not scared. I kissed her forehead and turned to the nurse, a round woman with glasses and a clipboard. She's going to be okay, the nurse said kindly. But I did notice something on her intake forms. My blood went cold. I couldn't find her blood type listed. And when I tried to match it with the emergency contact file, there were a few inconsistencies. I forced a calm expression. Oh, I must have messed something up when I filled them out. I'll fix it. The nurse looked at me for a second too long. Not suspicious, but thoughtful. I'm sure it's nothing. But it's really important we have accurate information in case of a real emergency. I nodded quickly and left, Ava's tiny hand wrapped around mine. But inside, I was spiraling. That night, I pulled out every document I had, the fake birth certificate, the forged baptism record, even a made-up vaccination report I'd submitted when she was 5. I cross-checked dates, fixed typos, created backups. I called the same friend who'd helped me before, he's a lawyer now, one with a shaky moral compass and an even shakier marriage, and begged him to help me draft a legal document that could pass as a hospital discharge summary. "Carrie," he said after a long pause, "you need to understand that if this ever unravels, they won't just take her away. You could go to prison." I didn't answer him. I didn't need to. He already knew. I was doing the wrong thing, but only because it was the only way to do the right thing. Ava is my daughter. I don't care what biology says. I don't care what the law says. She is mine. I had just started to breathe again, to believe I had patched enough of the holes, when the postcard came. It was simple. A beach. A palm tree. A sunset. On the back, in Sam's unmistakable looping handwriting, were 3 words. "I'm still watching. No return address. Postmarked from Florida." I stared at it for hours. I hadn't seen or heard from her since the night she disappeared from that motel. I had no idea if she was dead or in rehab or sleeping on a beach with someone else's credit card. And now, 7 years later, she was back, not in person, but close enough to ruin everything. She had always known how to strike when I was just starting to feel safe. I threw the postcard into the garbage disposal, turned the switch, and watched it shred like the paper couldn't scream loud enough. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of Ava's bed, watching her tiny chest rise and fall. She sleeps like a starfish, arms splayed, mouth slightly open, and with her blanket twisted around her feet like a tornado had passed through. I touched her hair and whispered so softly I could barely hear myself, "I'm sorry for the lie. I just needed you to be mine." She stirred, but didn't wake. I wanted to believe she'd understand one day. That when she was old enough, she'd see the love behind the crime. That she wouldn't hate me for stealing her life in order to save mine. But I'm not sure that's how stories like this end. Because love can build worlds, and lies can burn them down just as fast. And I'm walking that tightrope every single day. Some lies feel like they're made of glass, transparent, fragile, shimmering if you tilt your head just right in the light. Others are made of steel, forged in the heat of desperation and silence, too heavy to carry yet somehow welded into your ribs. I had spent 13 years building a life on both kinds, and by the time Ava turned 13, the weight had settled into my bones in a way that made everything, my job, my relationships, even the way I walked, feel like an exercise in careful balance. Ava had always been bright, but now she was something else entirely, sharp-edged, observant, and, in that very specific teenage way, insistent on peeling back every curtain I had ever stitched closed. She'd begun to change overnight, like some part of her childhood had quietly folded its wings and stepped aside, allowing in this new creature who looked like me but asked questions I didn't have answers for. "Why don't we have any pictures of you pregnant with me?" she asked one morning, holding a photo album I'd forgotten was even on the shelf. "There's baby pictures, sure, but none of you pregnant. Not one." I froze, coffee mug halfway to my lips. I had prepared for this question since the day I took Ava home, but the truth was, no amount of mental rehearsing ever fully equips you to lie to your daughter while she's staring at you like she already knows something is missing. "I wasn't feeling well that year," I replied, setting the mug down so carefully it didn't even clink. "I hated how I looked, I barely went out, and we didn't take a lot of photos." Ava tilted her head, clearly unconvinced. "Not even one selfie? No bump pics at all?" "Some women don't like documenting that kind of stuff," I said, managing to keep my tone casual even as my palms began to sweat. It was a hard pregnancy. I didn't feel like myself. She let it go, for that day, at least, but I could see the questions multiplying behind her eyes like cracks in a mirror, just waiting for the right pressure to shatter it all. And then the real fracture came. It started as a nosebleed during gym class. Not unusual, Ava had always been prone to them. But this one didn't stop. She bled through an entire roll of paper towels before the nurse called me. We went to the doctor, thinking maybe it was just dryness or hormones or stress, but one blood test turned into another, and suddenly I was filling out medical history forms that didn't belong to me. "We need to know about clotting disorders, autoimmune conditions, anything that runs in the family," the doctor said gently. "Especially maternal history. Ava's platelet counts are a bit low, and we want to make sure we're not missing something." I stared at the clipboard like it had grown teeth. "I'll need to double-check with my family," I said finally, scribbling nonsense answers that wouldn't raise eyebrows but meant absolutely nothing. On the drive home, Ava didn't ask about the appointment. Instead, she said quietly, "If something's wrong with me, I want to know where I come from." I almost pulled over. My fingers gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. But I kept driving, kept breathing, kept telling myself the same thing I always did: "This is your child. You are her mother. No one can take that away." But it felt less and less true with every mile. As if the universe decided I hadn't had enough, Tom proposed that weekend. Tom, the sweet, patient man from the legal office where I worked. The one who brought me soup when I was sick and never asked too many questions about my past. He loved Ava, in the awkward way men do when they want to love their partner's child but aren't sure how. He tried, and he respected her space, and for the most part, I thought she liked him. Until he got down on one knee in the backyard and asked if he could be part of our family forever. She didn't say anything during the moment. She clapped politely, even hugged him. But the next morning, her silence had weight. "You're replacing someone you never even told me about," she said flatly, standing in the kitchen, barefoot and pale. "It's not fair to expect me to be happy about that." "I'm not replacing anyone," I said, my voice breaking despite myself. "You don't even remember him. He wasn't part of our lives. But he existed, right? I wasn't made in a lab, so someone helped. And you never talk about it. Not once." I didn't know what to say. So I didn't say anything. That week, she started acting out, small things at first, ignoring my text, slamming doors, refusing to eat dinner with us. Then came the parent-teacher conference that shattered me. "Carrie," Mrs. Ramirez said gently, after closing the door to her classroom and asking me to sit. "Ava's grades are fine, but emotionally, something's going on. She seems angry, withdrawn. Today she told another student her mother lies about everything." I didn't mean to cry. Not in that small plastic chair. Not under those fluorescent lights. But I did. I sobbed. "I don't know how to help her," I whispered. "I don't know how to help her without breaking her." Mrs. Ramirez offered tissues. She didn't press. She just sat with me until I stopped shaking. That night, after Ava went to bed, I did something I promised myself I never would. I searched for Samantha. It took hours, Facebook groups, forums, an old friend from high school who still lived in our hometown. Eventually, I found her. Samantha Blake. Inmate number 48017. Incarcerated at Marion Correctional Center for wire fraud and multiple counts of identity theft. I sent a letter. Just one. I didn't expect her to write back. But she did. 3 weeks later, a thick envelope arrived, postmarked with the prison's return address. Her handwriting was exactly the same, looped and vicious. The letter was 5 pages long. I read it alone, after Ava had gone to bed. It was brutal. "You always wanted to save me," it began. "And you always thought that meant you were better than me." She didn't ask about Ava. Didn't say she missed her. Didn't even acknowledge that she had once held her in her arms and then walked away. "I didn't want her," Sam wrote. "You knew that. You saw what I was. You just wanted a reason to feel like the good one." Then, toward the end, came something I didn't expect. "You were always afraid of who her father might be. Maybe that's why you've never looked. Maybe you know it was someone who'd ruin everything. Maybe it's someone you still see around that little town of yours. Think about that, Carrie. Think hard." I stared at the letter for a long time. Then I took it outside, lit a match, and watched it burn in the grill. The flames curled her words into smoke, and I told myself that it was just a warning, not a truth. That she was trying to hurt me. That she didn't know what she was talking about. But the ashes stayed on my hands even after I washed them. Now, I look at Ava and wonder if she sees the cracks. If she feels the distance widening between who I pretend to be and what I really am. I want to tell her. I want to give her the truth, not for me, but because she deserves it. But then I think of her eyes. The way they glow when she talks about science. The way she still, sometimes, holds my hand in public. The way she tells people I'm her best friend. I'm afraid that if I give her the truth, I won't just lose her love, I'll lose her entirely. So instead, I keep the secret. And every night, while she sleeps, I whisper apologies into the dark. Because I am her mother. And mothers, the good ones, the desperate ones, the lying ones, do whatever it takes to protect their children. Even if it means becoming the villain in their story. I always thought if everything ever came crashing down, it would happen slowly, like watching a storm roll in across a field, distant thunder, skies darkening, the faint smell of rain before the first drop ever touched the ground. But when it happened, it didn't arrive in waves or with warning. It landed like a car crash, loud and irreversible, with no time to swerve or brace or pretend everything was going to be okay. Ava was 17, 2 months from graduation, and neck-deep in college essays, standardized testing, and the kind of identity searching that makes everything in a teenager's life feel like it's either a ticking bomb or a golden ticket. She'd always been ambitious, methodical, and a little obsessive, traits I had once mistaken as signs she was growing into me. But now, I realized they were part of the armor she had built on her own, forged from a childhood half built on whispers and half-truths. It started with a school project. Her AP biology class assigned a semester-long portfolio on inherited traits and familial genetics. Some students did poster boards about eye color or dimples. Ava chose a direct-to-consumer DNA kit, the kind that comes in a sleek white box and promises you a family tree in 6 weeks or less. She never told me. When the results came in, she didn't confront me right away. She waited. I realize now that she needed to be absolutely sure before she detonated the bomb she knew would change everything. I'd been so wrapped up in wedding planning with Tom, delayed twice, downsized once, and managing overtime at the office that I didn't notice the way she watched me like someone trying to solve a puzzle with too many missing pieces. The night it happened, I was folding laundry in the living room, watching a rerun of something I wasn't really following, when she walked in holding a printout, color-coded, official-looking, and shaking slightly in her hand. "I did a DNA test," she said, voice tight and low and shaking in the way that only comes when someone is trying desperately not to scream. I stood slowly, my heart hammering before she even finished the sentence. "Ava, you're not my mother." She said it like a punch. No emotion. Just fact. Listen, please, it's not what you think. "You've lied to me every day of my life," she said, louder now, louder and more cracked and breaking. "Every single day." I tried to explain, truly, I did, but the words fell out of my mouth like broken teeth. I told her about Samantha. About the motel. About the crying baby on the bed and the vodka and the note. About how I couldn't call CPS because I couldn't risk losing her. About the forged papers and the lies I told not because I wanted to hurt her, but because I loved her so much I couldn't imagine a world without her in it. But Ava wasn't a child anymore. She didn't want fairy tales or noble reasons. She wanted the truth, and she wanted it yesterday. "You had so many chances," she sobbed, fists clenched. "You could have told me when I was 10, or 13, or last year. But you kept lying." "I was trying to protect you," I said, though the words sounded hollow even to me. "No," she said, voice raw now. "You were protecting yourself." She left that night. She didn't slam the door, she closed it gently, which somehow hurt more. She went to my parents' house. The same parents I had sworn would never learn the truth unless it came from me directly, in controlled words, in a carefully written letter that never got sent. They didn't scream when she told them. They cried. Then they called me. I didn't pick up. Because I couldn't bear to hear the sound of disappointment in my mother's voice. Not again, not this way. The next few days passed like a dream you're aware you're trapped in. I went to work, answered emails, ran payroll, even helped a client write a demand letter, but none of it registered. Every night I came home to a house that was missing the very heartbeat it had revolved around for nearly 2 decades. Tom tried to comfort me, but I think a part of him realized what he was seeing now was the real me, the raw, exposed, shattered version of a woman who had built a life out of a secret and now couldn't remember how to speak without choking on it. The rumors started soon after. Someone, maybe from school, maybe from the church, maybe someone who overheard the wrong thing in the grocery store, began whispering. First, it was questions. "Did you hear Carrie isn't Ava's real mom? I thought she adopted her." "No, apparently she just took her." The town split in half like dry wood. Some people I had gone to potlucks with and helped during hard times, looked at me now like I was a thief. Others, mostly mothers, mostly quiet, hugged me in parking lots and whispered, "You did what you had to do." But the worst was the letter that came in a manila envelope marked confidential. It was from the Department of Family Services. An anonymous report had been filed questioning the legality of Ava's guardianship and the authenticity of her adoption records. My hands shook so hard I couldn't open it. I had to sit down, drink 2 sips of water, and remind myself to breathe before I even began to read. They wanted documentation, proof of legal guardianship, medical records, court paperwork. I had forged so many things over the years that even I wasn't sure anymore what could pass inspection and what might get me arrested. I spent the next 2 weeks assembling everything I had, consulting a lawyer who had known me long enough to ask no questions, and preparing myself for the very real possibility that I could lose her, not because I didn't love her enough, but because I loved her so much I had bent the law until it almost broke. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating. I wasn't functioning. And then came the worst moment of all, walking into Ava's room and realizing her scent was gone. She had always left little things behind when she went on trips, a sock under the bed, a bobby pin near the mirror, a half-used lip balm in the drawer. Now it was sterile, quiet, stripped. I sat on her bed, picked up the baby blanket she had once carried everywhere, the one with faded cartoon stars and frayed edges, and held it to my chest like it could still sing lullabies. "I'm still your mother," I whispered. "I always was." No one heard me but the walls, but I think they believed me anyway. If there's one thing I've learned in the aftermath of everything, after the storm, the silence, the years of aching absence, it's that time doesn't heal all wounds. What time does, if you're lucky, is dull the sharp edges so you can walk through your own life without slicing yourself open on every memory you left behind. Time allows you to limp forward with scars that don't always throb. And sometimes, very rarely, it delivers you to a moment when a door you thought was sealed shut creaks open, just enough for light to pour in. Ava is 25 now. I know this because I never forgot a single one of her birthdays, even when I didn't get to see her. Every June 17th, I still light a candle at 9:43 a.m., the minute she first opened her eyes to the world, the minute I first saw her lying in that motel bed like a question I had no answer for, and knew instantly that I would never let go. We hadn't spoken in over 4 years. The last real words exchanged were spat through tears in a courtroom hallway while I fought to retain the right to be legally named her guardian after the anonymous report nearly cost me everything. She was 21 then, already halfway out the door of both the legal battle and the relationship that had once tethered us so tightly it felt like we shared bone. She had moved to Chicago shortly after, finished college, got her own apartment, found a life that didn't include me. I followed her from a distance, through cautious phone calls to my mother, through the social media accounts she sometimes forgot to keep private, through old coworkers who said, "She looks like you," though they had no idea how deeply untrue and deeply accurate that was. Then, 2 weeks ago, a number appeared on my screen that I had long ago committed to memory but never truly believed I would see again. I almost didn't answer. The part of me still afraid of rejection, still convinced I didn't deserve even the sound of her voice, froze. But another part, the part that will always pick her out of a crowd, the part that never stopped being her mother, hit accept. "Hi," she said, her voice older, steadier, more guarded than I remembered. "This is probably weird, but I need to talk to you." She told me she was engaged, to a man named Theo, a nurse she met while volunteering with a pediatric cancer fundraiser. She told me he was kind and patient and had the best laugh. And then she told me they were thinking about trying for kids in the next few years, but her doctor had flagged some concerns about genetic markers and family medical history. "I don't have anything," she said quietly. "Not really." And I didn't know who else to ask. I didn't cry then. I just said, "Name the time and place." She chose a city 2 hours from mine and 3 from hers, neutral ground, neither home nor foreign. A middle ground for two people who had become strangers, but never completely. We met in a little cafe tucked between a used bookstore and a florist. I got there early, because of course I did, and spent 30 agonizing minutes stirring a cup of tea that had gone cold twice. When she walked in, I almost didn't recognize her, not because she looked different, but because she looked like someone I had only ever imagined as a future version of the child I once held through colic and nightmares and scraped knees. She was taller than I remembered, wearing a navy coat that reminded me painfully of the one I bought her for her first internship interview. Her hair was darker now, her eyes a little wearier. But her face, that face, still carried echoes of my sister, and shadows of my own reflection. "Hi," she said, her voice gentler than I had dared to hope. "Hi," I replied, standing slowly. "Thank you for coming." She didn't smile, but she didn't frown either. She sat across from me and looked at the tea in my hand. "You always did that," she said. "Order something and forget to drink it." I laughed, then covered my mouth, afraid it would break the moment. We talked for nearly an hour. Mostly about surface-level things, her job, my work at the courthouse, Theo's family, the new dog they rescued. Eventually, the conversation turned. "Do you have anything medical?" she asked, voice suddenly more businesslike. "From, my mother. Or whoever he was." I pulled out a small envelope, handed it across the table. Inside was a single photo, the only one I had ever taken of Ava as an infant. It was grainy, badly lit, taken in a motel room with shaking hands. She was wrapped in a towel, cheeks red, eyes closed, a little storm in a tiny bundle. Ava stared at it for a long time. "I kept it," I said, my voice barely audible. "Even when I thought I'd never see you again, I kept it." She didn't respond for several moments. Then, very softly, she said, "I hated you for a long time." I nodded, accepting the words like a blade pressed against old scar tissue. "I know. And I deserved that hate. I didn't tell you the truth when I should have. I hurt you by pretending that love was enough to replace everything else." She exhaled shakily. "But," she continued, her eyes wet but steady, "I still call your number when things go wrong. Even if I never let it ring." even if I just needed to see your name light up the screen. Something broke in me then. Something that had been held together with grief and guilt and silence for far too long. I wanted to be everything for you, I said, tears now freely falling. And I thought if I told you the truth, you'd see me as a thief instead of your mother. I did, she admitted, for a while. And now? She looked down at the photo again, then tucked it into her purse. Now I'm trying to figure out if I can have both. We sat in silence for a while after that. When the check came, she paid it, ignoring my protest. I'll come visit, she said as we stood. Not all the time. Not yet. But I want to try. I nodded, afraid to speak, afraid even gratitude would sound like manipulation. She leaned in and hugged me, not tightly, not long, but enough. And then, as she pulled away, she whispered something that took me weeks to fully believe I had heard correctly. Bye, Mom. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I just watched her walk away, my hands shaking, my lungs full of something I hadn't felt in years. Not hope, exactly, but something softer, something close. As the door closed behind her, I whispered to no one at all, you were never mine, but you were always my daughter.